All right, this is Jeremy Zwinger with the Rice Trader, just doing our weekly summary for you. It's August 13th, 2018, and as always, it's an interesting week in the rice world. So just to get in it, there's actually quite a bit happening in our market right now. There's a quite dichotomy between having the strongest demand in history, and yet clearly sales are dropping off now. There's a real struggle to make sales in a lot of markets, and this has caused additional weakness. So it's very interesting. I mean, it goes without saying, politically, it's a very volatile time, especially for those of us living in the US and seeing all this trade and tariff wars. And we just see an extremely volatile time right now of relatively high supplies and extreme political interference, even beyond the norm. You know, as we've said over the last several months, it has a feeling of the late 80s. And that's not positive to price, and that's not positive to global stability. It is a very big concern for us. But just to hit some of the main points, obviously I've already talked about what we see happening on an overview. Just number one, obviously the Chinese trade war with the US is a key point. It is affecting the globe and definitely weakening the idea of free trade. Additional tariffs were put on again, with 16 billion worth of U.S. goods on the Chinese side, and talk of the U.S. putting more tariffs in the hundreds of billions of dollars more on China. It's continuing the tit-for-tat theory of if you want to put tariffs, we'll put more. And it does seem to me that China has much more to lose right now than the U.S. and the overall trade balance. And there is quite a bit of instability potential in China. It's also bleeding over to Europe and Turkey. Again, Turkey and the US are really at the same level as this. There's additional drops, massive drops in the Turkish lira, which makes trade into there extremely difficult, and internal food prices are clearly running. This is a major issue, with the US putting additional tariffs on steel, aluminum, and other products as even this morning. So these things need to be watched very closely. Moving a little bit more back to rice, we continue to see some issues in the drought in Australia that need to be watched. It can possibly restrict supplies in the coming year. It's not a huge issue today, and there is time for these rain supplies to recover. Something to watch longer term. But over that, we see the Viet supplies again just being so huge, and this market has not still digested how this huge amount of Vietnamese medium grain, short grain is going to affect the overall complex. And I've said to some friends privately, you know, there is so much medium grain in the world, you could see medium grain go into a discount to long grain, indica rice. And this is the type of situation where that actually should occur. And I'll get the data a little bit into it in a second when I get to the WASI report. The floods in Asia are also continuing to cause issues, especially in Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam, and Thailand. So we need to watch that as well. Although again, we have some of the highest ending stocks after this current year since all the way back to 2000, 2001. So very high supplies. Again, the Iraq tender will happen this week, and it's really kind of a waiting mode on that. And really overall in prices, because of that, we're not seeing much. We saw a little bit of a gain in Thailand and a little bit of a drop in India. $5 up in Thai, $5 down in India. Being at about 380 for 5%, Thai remains a real bargain. And really it's at rough parity. You're seeing all the major origins now have moved back to rough parity. Not parity in quality, but definitely parity in price. Remains the outlier of the US being almost $200 a ton higher than that. It's a real disparity in prices, which should lead into major change as we go into this period. And so to kind of move with that and some of the WASI data that we just saw today come out just at 9 a.m. our time, the U.S. is struggling. You can see it in the current data and the estimation of exports and trade. In addition to that, we've already mentioned you're seeing massive imports of Asian rice into Mexico and Central America. In fact, it's the lowest time of U.S. percent of trade to Mexico since NAFTA was signed. You're seeing several vessels from Thailand, several vessels from China. You're seeing South America move up into the region. It just gets down to you can't have U.S. prices at $590, $600 in some reports and have Asian prices so cheap. It doesn't make any sense, especially with the massive advantage, even quality in Asia right now. But just moving to the WASD, for those who really get close to the data, USDA really put a bearish report in the market. As I'm just sitting here, opening up my computer, of which we're going to change soon, so you'll be able to see what I'm seeing on my computer. You're seeing a drop across the board, and I mean heavy drop on the futures market. You got soybeans down to 860, corn down to 371, and wheat down to 569. And the rice futures are going towards that $10 hundredweight that we predicted. It's 1053. I have a few bets out to friends. I would put the $20 in a frame, as I do in my office, that the market will go below $10 a hundredweight. So the market is signaling that. Obviously, it's a horribly under-traded volume market that does affect it. You could have a fund change it, and it's not really deliverable. And so you kind of have to watch the particularity of the rice contract, because even though the fundamentals are extremely negative, local players and fund players could mess that up for just classic volume trading. But signals are very strong. It should go below $10 and significantly below $10. And again, just in the WASD, USDA increased the crop in both long and medium grain, which is not a real surprise. Overall, the supply is much higher. They actually have usage for long grain at 102 million hundredweights, and we're thinking that usage is probably, with this Mexican stuff, going to be towards 97. So we believe it's a -5 on the balance. We also think their exports are going to be significantly down, versus that domestic trade, and we figure it's more like 65 next year. So in our book, we see the USDA crop and ending stocks. We actually think the crop is higher than USDA. It's at least an 8 million hundredweight turnaround ending stocks, which is extremely significant, which adds to our negativity. When we get into long or medium grain, it's worse. We think USDA is off at least 9 million hundredweights in the medium grain crop. They're calling it 57 million hundredweights, and it's probably closer to I would say 66, 65 million hundredweights. So a significant drop in what really is out there. We hear from seed sales, the data, it's significantly indicating that the South is above 300,000 acres, which should equal 22-ish million hundredweights. And California is well above 500,000 acres, which should give you at least 43, 42 million hundredweights, even with the smoke that we've seen. So really, that's at least another 8 million hundredweights of additional medium grain stocks. Now you add that into the Viet issue of 1.1 million hundredweights of exportable quantity. The Australians having a very good current crop, and all the issues going around. It's just a lot of supply for medium grain. And so we just are very negative on that crop. Outside of this, it is an interesting market of both weather and politics. We are in the midst of the monsoon. We're in the midst of political seasons and elections coming. You're going to have to watch this one very close. I continue to see the potential for Asian rice to go down into the low 300s. You definitely have weak fundamentals, even though we've had a great year of trade, but the trade doesn't see that. They see the slow sales into Africa, the Chinese competition versus China buying rice. It's really affecting the psychology. And so I think the view of supplies and political intervention is taking over this market, and I just have to say it's weak. Maybe there'll be something in the market with weather or politics that shift this. I don't get negative very often, but looking at the futures, looking at what I'm seeing in supplies, you have to fall to that this market is negative. It's just a very difficult situation, and we've gone through a long, decent run in prices, but I just see them down. It could be down for a period. In addition to that, we do a very nice summary in Section 10 of the Brokens market. There's also much more extensive monthly data on Pakistan to take a look at. So it's a very interesting piece in the Rice Trader. Often this quick summary can only touch on the key issues. And I know many of the executives go much more in depth over the weekend as they look at the Rice Trader and see the great data that the staff spends a lot of amount of time putting together on a consistent basis. With that, it's just a pleasure to be able to give this TRT summary. I want to, of course, invite you all to the World Conference, October 10th to 12th. It is our 10th anniversary. Please come in, please register early. Friends have been with us for a long time. We'd love to have you as sponsors and just highlighting this key milestone for the world rice industry. I see great times ahead and look forward to seeing my friends in October. And with that, I'm just going to sign off.